Okay, welcome back to the Modern Middle.
Part two.
Part 2 of episode 2.
Yeah.
Just kind of give you a little background on what we did in part 1. We went and covered the timeline all the way up until around the election of Donald Trump. We talked about a few things between November 8th of that year and the end of 2016. We're going to cover a little bit of that right here, and then we're going to get into Michael Flynn a little bit and talk about how he is involved with different goings-on while Trump is president, which we're going to get into quickly here. So, like we know, November 8th, Trump's elected president. We talked about how the funding for the opposition research through Christopher Steele stopped in terms of Clinton paying for it or the DNC paying for it, and was picked up by the CEO of Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson. So that document made its way to McCain on December 1st. It was delivered to the FBI on December 9th. And that's kind of like one of the best pieces of evidence that we have where we know for a fact, like, the FBI received all of the Steele dossiers. This is where they really had, at least on the books.
Something juicy, yeah.
Yeah. And then one of the very important things that happened in the Obama administration as they were exiting, right, as this like transition of power was taking place, is that on December 29th, Obama announces new sanctions on Russia. So he raises the sanctions on Russia, and he sets them up in a way where in about a month they're going to have to be reevaluated, and they're going to have to be sort of.
I'm going to interject real quick. It was 22nd of December is when he announced them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And 29th is when some other, yeah.
Sure. Okay, so the 22nd of December, the new sanctions on Russia put in place, and that's something that we're going to see. Trump's going to have to deal with that quickly as soon as he becomes president. Yeah. So another thing that happens on December 29th, which is a very big part of this investigation, has to do with Michael Flynn. So I'm going to hand it over to DJ to kind of give us a background on how he's involved and what happened at the end of that at 2016.
So I just actually kind of wanted to hit on the Obama sanctions before I move into the Michael Flynn portion. This could have definitely been a power move. This could have been a move specifically set up to affect the Trump administration when coming into office.
Yeah. Could be.
I just wanted to make that clear as a statement from apparently your guys' side of this.
Well, think about it. If Obama knows all that's going on, what better way to stir the pot a little bit?
Yeah, he already knows Trump is going into office. It's definitely a way to make him have to do something. I mean, essentially,
I feel like it's a chess move.
Yeah.
It hurts. It would hurt the Trump administration.
Because if if there's Russian, if he's with the Russians, then obviously he has to backpedal these sanctions.
He's going to have to make a PR move in a way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It puts him in a weird spot.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
But now we get into Flynn, and Russia finds out about these sanctions, and this is coming before the election in January. And this is really the first look at where some of the shady side of the Trump administration work starts to come into play. Michael Flynn is talking with Russian ambassadors about the new sanctions and to delay certain investigations, or not investigations. He wanted to delay the United Nations Security Council vote on the sanctions. Yeah. And there was also a couple of things that he added in discussions about what Russia should kind of do as a reaction to these sanctions. And he was pretty much essentially saying, okay, guys, keep your cool for right now.
Back off.
Back off. There's something's going to be good for you guys in the future. Or something.
We'll take care of you.
And the biggest thing is that he lied about this information. Michael Flynn was indicted, and he was charged and sentenced to jail because of him lying to Congress when he was asked questions about this specific incident. So we have to keep that in mind, that is another reason why it was kind of shady, indicted. Because he was trying to hide that information. Yeah. So right after that, Trump gets in office.
You mean Trump takes office?
Trump takes office. Yeah. Trump was already won the election, but now Trump is actually taking the office, and we start to see some bills where he's passing the easing of sanctions. The sanctions get eased a little bit. Russia gets a little bit off of their back.
Right. So Trump eases the sanctions on February 2nd.
February 2nd. Okay.
And just to touch on that, the way that Obama had set it up it's not necessarily that Trump eased the sanctions. It's just that it's the same kind of thing where like Trump would say like I'm not going to continue Obamacare. It's like someone put a law in place that Trump was expected to perpetuate and he just didn't. You know?
I actually think that it's because these sanctions are weird, and there is a lot of specifics into the sanctions. Like some sanctions only affect certain businessmen, certain industries, and certain people. So we kind of have to. You'd have to do a lot of digging to like look up the specific laws and regulations based upon the sanctions.
Another thing that I think you missed is that directly after Michael Flynn's discussion with the Russian ambassador, so this is Russia's ambassador, not like the U.S.'s ambassador to Russia, right? After that meeting, what we do know is publicly released, Russia says it's not going to retaliate for the sanctions.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so, Obama sets the sanctions on 12/29. Flynn has a meeting with the ambassador the same day.
Yeah, it was 22nd.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, a week later.
I have the date wrong on my timeline here. I apologize. So, 22nd, the sanctions go in place. Flynn has a meeting on the 29th. And the 30th, Russia comes out and says, we're cool.
Yeah, we're cool. We're good.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like
Flynn already told us what's going to happen here.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's
right. And looking
why,
back,
why would they release
it
a
makes
statement?
sense, right?
Yeah.
I think that if people were paying attention to this at the time, they'd probably think, why is Russia okay with this?
What's going on?
But just that, like you said, we didn't know about this Flynn conversation at this time. Those indictments didn't happen well into the Mueller investigation.
Yeah, once we started the research, we're like, makes complete
now we
sense
understand. Now, whenever this was presented by the news, he lied about talking to a Russian ambassador. Doesn't really seem that important.
Right.
But whenever you actually stick it to where it actually is and how it affected other events, it kind of makes a lot of sense that he was charged with that certain indictment.
So then, I think we have just a general date here. In early January, Cohen starts receiving some payments. You want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, correct. So Cohen received $500,000 through that Essential Corporation that he set up.
The one in Delaware,
the one
Essential
in Delaware.
Consulting LLC.
Yeah, and he receives this $500,000 from big player Victor Velsinski?
Vexelberg.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Victor Vexelberg. So he gets $500,000 from him, and the thing with him is Victor Vexelberg lost $3 billion in the sanctions. And his net worth is like $18 billion. So when you're talking about
17.4, something like that.
Yeah. So if you're talking him losing money on sanctions, and that's a big percentage of like his net worth. So that makes you really wonder where that money, why he was sending that money. He was known to already donate to the Trump campaign. He donated them he publicly donated to them $250,000 previously. I think it was like a welcoming into the office and sort of thing. I forget, but it makes you wonder if he was paying this money because like as some kind of kickback for Trump not doing something with the sanctions.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big premise that I think kind of links all this together is the sanctions money.
I think honestly that's like the most logical conclusion you can make of it.
Well, the thing is that just to keep the timeline in order here, Trump, if we say just like for ease of conversation, he eased the sanctions. I know there's some complexities there that we mentioned, but so when Trump eases the sanctions on February 2nd, the payments had started previously in early January. So those are the dates that we have that money was coming into Cohen's LLC in early January. So it almost seems like they were like, here to take this, like
money.
Please don't continue what Obama did.
For sure.
In a way, I mean maybe that's sort of the
but couldn't that be like potential corruption right there?
Yeah, I mean I think
influence in the office.
Like ethics in terms of business is like you can't take money from people. There's like so many rules in like corporate America in terms of like meeting with business partners. Like, can you buy them lunch? What kind of gift can you buy them? It's got to be like under $50 and stuff. So that kind of thing is like definitely. It's not necessarily.
I feel like if it's not illegal, it should be like.
Yeah,
it should be punished like a punished a lot more.
I guess the thing is we don't know what they claim. I guess we don't know. Maybe the evidence is out there, but currently we don't have the facts on what was that money actually for. What did they say it was for?
And there's also we're also talking about Trump at this time. He's already had business dealings in New York City. He's had these meetings talking about Trump Tower and getting his businesses over there.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure Victor Vexelberg, he had stated that he could help him with Trump Tower at one point. I'm not 100% sure of that. But there's apparently, if you're talking and you're having conversations with these high prominent, he's the fourth richest person in Russia.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's not like he's a small player. He's very high up there. He's an oligarch in the Russian administration.
There's one thing I want to kind of mention. Like, I feel like because all of these situations are so ambiguous, it could have been so different. Like the potential of what the payments could have been or something. That's why it was so hard to prove that there was actual collusion or actual corruption.
But because we don't have the paper trail, or
just because you don't know what it's for.
Right.
There's so many scapegoat avenues that they could be like, this was for this, this was for
it's
this.
It's like the plausible
exactly.
deniability,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's like the perfect thing.
Yeah, it was really like, and we talked about this in the Hillary funding through Fusion GPS, right? They create like a legal barrier where it's like we don't have to tell you about what's happening underneath the surface here, you know.
It's consulting.
Because it's a
business.
business.
Under that consulting
market. So there's some other stuff that's happening around this time, early January. Trump's about to get into office. I think it's the 19th when that happens, right?
I'm sorry, but I wanted to hit back at this one point. I kind of forgot that the money that went to Cohen, there also wasn't money specifically from Victor Vexelberg.
Yeah.
We kind of want to talk and hit the points that there was multiple things. This was the same account that money went out to Stormy Daniels. This is where when the payment was actually made to Stormy Daniels' lawyer for the NDA that was signed previously.
Yeah.
There was also money that was received from AT&T and a drug conglomerate Novartis,
Korea Aerospace Industries,
and the Korean Aerospace Industries. So it's weird that he's receiving payments from all of these, and Trump had also previously in his campaign stated about stopping the Time Warner AT&T merger. And so like you kind of have to wonder if this was almost a shelled kickback account where he's receiving money that's influencing his policies on all grounds. I mean, I know we hit the sanctions, but if we're talking about the AT&T and these other things too,
possible
Time Warner, and letting that merger go through because he received.
I mean, that stuff is like
essentially could
very,
be right.
very hard to prove.
Yeah. It's definitely hard.
It's the same. It's the same as a lot of this stuff, which is like it definitely doesn't look good.
It doesn't.
I mean, and we may not ever be able to prove this stuff. We can get to this later, but it's tough. It actually takes work. I mean, we've had to do this in discussing this and researching this, that you really have to get disciplined about your biases and sort of filling in the gaps with what you want it to be. You know what I mean? I mean, there's certain things that we know and there's certain things that we speculate on that maybe the evidence points to. It doesn't mean there's another explanation.
Also, think about it. Mueller reports out. Obviously, he didn't find evidence that it was, illegal or unlawful.
Right. In a criminal sense,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it makes sense why, nothing has come of this. It's too ambiguous.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in terms of what the public knows. I mean, we can look at the summary, of the investigation and go, well, no matter what's underneath of all of those redacted pages, ultimately Mueller said no more indictments, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something in there that we would look at and go, I feel a lot stronger about calling him guilty, or
or even
because we don't really know. We don't know what's going on in Mueller's mind. We don't know what's going on underneath those redacted pages either. So, is that you feel good about kind of where we've covered Michael Flynn and the
I'm pretty sure. I think we covered
a
lot of that portion with them.
Because the other thing that's going on right now, which dropped on January 10th, is when the Steele dossier was leaked. So BuzzFeed gets a hold of this, and it goes
Who would have
right
thought
up.
BuzzFeed?
Yeah, right. And so on January 10th, that happens, and what we have is, which I guess we could cover this real quick. Peter Strzok, I think it's maybe an email, maybe a text message. I'm not sure. Either way. This is a quote from him on that day. He's saying, "Our internal system is blocking the site. I have the PDF via iPhone, but it's 25.6 megabytes. Comparing now, the set is only identical to what McCain had. It has differences from what was given to us by Korn," that's the guy from Mother Jones, and Simpson, who's the guy that is the CEO of Fusion GPS, who was just delivering essentially what Christopher Steele was. just to touch on that, I mean, so basically what Strzok is saying there is like we've got multiple sources where this dossier is coming in. This one is not. It's not like all the other ones. He's saying it's only identical to what McCain had.
So there's different file sizes, different information.
And another person that we haven't touched on, which I think I'd like to take the opportunity now just to, this will probably be all we say about him, but he is sort of instrumental here. This guy down here, Bruce Orr. And so Bruce Orr works at the Justice Department, and this is his wife, Nellie Orr. So she works at Fusion GPS, at least at this time, right? And we have testimony that says that Nellie Orr, at least on 2 occasions, gives a thumb drive of information to Bruce Orr, her husband, to give to the FBI. She says things, and I think this is through Bruce Orr quoting her in his testimony, so I don't ever think she was actually deposed, at least publicly. He's saying, like, well, she was doing this research on things that were related to what FBI was investigating, but not the same thing that Steele was doing for Fusion GPS. Okay. So she's kind of like another independent...
Like a private investigator.
Right. And so she's delivering information, I think we know on 2 occasions, through Bruce Orr to the FBI. And then we have the Steele dossier coming through McCain, coming through BuzzFeed, and then Mother Jones maybe knows something about it, and then Roger Stone is the other one that we didn't really dive into too much. Let's see, Roger Stone's up here. He's a Trump insider I think he's been doing business with Trump for like decades, right? Yep. And he started tweeting some stuff right before this, saying like, Hillary Clinton's she's going down or something like that.
Yeah, Wednesday, Clinton's going #WikiLeaks.
Yeah. And so that was like a big red flag for the investigators. Like, how does this guy know? Where is he getting this information? And just to kind of, because I think we can kind of sum up Roger Stone in a way here. He had just kind of gotten a back channel of communication in with WikiLeaks with Julian Assange, which, it was like through this British radio broadcaster that had done an interview with Julian Assange recently. So he was able to find out about this in some kind of way. What he was really indicted on was lying about that information, right? How he knew things like that. I think he, at least at the start, lied to investigators. So there's some other sources. I think it's just the important thing to point out here is that we think like Christopher Steele did this dossier and he just fed it to the FBI through somebody, but it was really like the way that it propagated through these leaks and then back out to the FBI in other ways from different sources. It just there's something potentially going on there as well, which is.
Well, why would you have different versions of the same document?
And what they did say was that like when they really compared them, they were all essentially the same. Mm-hmm. It was just that like some had slightly less information, but the information that they shared was identical. Uh-huh. So it was almost like someone just like maybe removed a few files and it was like there's another version, or could be like still adding more information as it goes on.
That's what I'm thinking. Like if he had this dossier and he gave somebody this information and they got it at this time. And then he continued investigating, working on it. Then he gave it to somebody else.
But wouldn't essentially still be the same document?
It's essentially the same document.
Yeah.
It's essentially
if you think about it from a logical standpoint,
it's you just want to get the newest version. It's a new version of the same.
It's probably the most plausible, and I think that if that were the case, they should have called that out because too many people speculating on this kind of thing. Especially they were trying to like contain the leaks. And, like, they were trying to understand them.
Even us, like we're speculating now.
Yeah.
What it could have
Especially when it also comes to the grounds of investigation, because I think when we talked about the FISA warrants, he was saying, I think you had stated previously that it said it came from multiple sources, but the information that he said came from multiple sources was actually the same dossier, just coming from 2 different people.
Right. Yeah. And just because I'm not sure on that, I don't know that the application for the FISA warrant said it came from multiple sources. There was a section that was unredacted about the source.
Okay.
And knowing what we know now, the assumption is the source is Christopher Steele.
Yeah.
And so they were just talking about like his credibility, essentially. And I don't know that they because this was way back, right? This was back in July 31 of the previous year where they started the investigation. I mean, it wasn't leaked until the 10th. It wasn't delivered to McCain until December 1st. Yeah. So there's some time there where, like, if you think about when these things were delivered, what we know now, like, what did they really have back when they started the investigation? How much credibility should they have put into Christopher Steele at that time?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because it sounds like he was just a one-man band who kind of got this started.
And we kind of touched on this earlier, like knowing what we know now, it's hard to look back at that and say it's unjustified because we got indictments,
Yeah.
you know, like people went to jail and people were punished for this stuff.
Well,
But you know, it doesn't mean we can't talk about the possibility.
I still think it's pretty questionable and kind of
and we have
sketchy.
to also look at what from that resulted from the Christopher Steele document. So now that we're getting into this, I kind of want to make sure we make that delineation between who was in the Steele dossier and what information that kind of contained. The Steele dossier kind of mostly contained information about Manafort and Gates. So Manafort was only in the Trump campaign for that short period of time. Like you said, we even think Trump, in part one, Trump should have made that decision. He's probably looking back on it now like that was a dumb decision.
Yeah.
And it also had a lot of, I mean, there's some good claims in there probably, but there's also some very vastly ridiculous claims dealing with like sexuality. I think they even said there's video evidence that Russia had holding it over Trump's head of him peeing on girls and different things.
Which I never saw that video.
I feel like that. I feel like that would be viral, or that would be out there if that was.
Maybe it's on the dark web.
We're not going on the dark web.
I don't know. They just in that FBI raid of Cohen, they just
we'll
found DVDs with dates on them. So who knows?
Oh well.
But
I don't want to see that.
I don't want to see that. But so I kind of want to make the delineation between Manafort and Gates and this other section of people that's talking to Russia. So we have Cohen, we have Flynn, and this is all dealing with the people that are talking about the Trump Tower deal, the sanctions. It's almost like a separate case.
I feel like that's like the Russian collusion. Is the Cohen, the Trump Towers, all that stuff.
And I'm sure, like on the timeline, we're getting pretty close to where Robert Mueller actually starts his investigation.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
So this is right around the time frame.
Yeah, that's the next thing in the timeline actually. So May 17th. Hang on one second. Let me just make sure here. So we had touched on it earlier, but ultimately February 2nd, Trump eases the sanctions on Russia, and we talked about how, you know, whether or not that's like him really easing it or
actually, like I'm pretty sure he was kind of pissed about it.
Yeah.
Like Congress said, you need to. No, he was enforcing sanctions on Russia.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Like he was almost like his hands were tied. Like he had to sign the paper.
He had to put more sanctions on Russia, and Trump was pissed about it, which kind of also seemed shady. Like why should he be upset? But he ultimately said that he could do a better job than Congress
in making these sorts of
in making
deals.
these country to country to.
And you have to imagine, you know, Trump and his hubris, right? Yeah, he'd just gotten into office, you know,
and they're telling him what to do.
He probably comes.
I don't want to do it.
Yeah, right.
But like looking back now that we've like talked about the timeline, all this went on, it seems like it could be shady.
Oh yeah.
That he didn't want to because it's going to ruin his relationship with Russia.
Right.
But also, if we look at this aspect of him possibly lowering the sanctions and helping out Russia with the sanctions for this, we kind of have to look at the picture of the Russian meddling in the investigation.
In the election?
In the election.
Okay. DNC hacks.
The DNC hacks and everything along these lines. So we do know that the Russian did these hacks. We talked about that again in part one. And it could have affected our election. We don't really know. We don't know the extent.
I think it's safe to say
it had to have had some impact.
It had to have had some impact. I mean,
I think the question right now is whether Trump was involved or he wasn't.
But
it did. It definitely affected our election.
If he was involved with these sanctions, though, and this is one of the big points I want to hit, it wouldn't really be necessary for Trump to ask Russia to do these hacks or to do these things.
Right.
If these billionaires like Victor and all of these Russian oligarchs know that they're going to be not losing billions of dollars a year now because of these sanctions getting eased and decreased, they're most likely going to meddle in the elections to get him into office anyway.
Yeah.
It's a better business.
I think we discussed that in part one.
Yeah.
That why would they want Hillary in office?
Right. Well,
Trump's a much better candidate.
When Hillary was Secretary of State, and you know, in the Obama administration, which in a way she was working with, right? They were not.
No.
They were not good with Russia.
Yeah.
You know,
they're not buddies.
Yeah.
So that's who's to say that Russia just didn't want to do it themselves.
Right.
Yeah,
No, they
just to
definitely
keep
had
it real.
motivation
Yeah.
to do it without
any
trying
payment,
to make
yeah.
agreements. You know?
100%.
Because essentially, in the long run, they're going to make more money and not have to deal with Hillary.
Yep. Shall we move on?
Yeah, so let's
absolutely.
actually get into the start
So-
of the Mueller investigation.
what we say, May 17th, Mueller is appointed by Rod Rosenstein. He is he's the Deputy Attorney General.
Yes,
Yeah,
is that right?
he's an attorney general. He's
Yeah,
definitely
so-
an attorney general or something.
So, James Comey, who's this guy, let me just zoom in over here. James Comey was leading the investigation that Strzok started. And there was a lot of stuff with Comey that just, it was pretty apparent to people kind of on both sides that the way he was handling the investigation wasn't fair and balanced, right? It was a partisan investigation. It was, we got those those text messages.
Yep.
We saw the bias that went into the start of it, and if this investigation was going to be taken seriously in the end, they needed kind of like a reset,
Oh yeah.
right? So they essentially just pushed Comey out, and they needed a replacement.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And so that was Mueller. And the good thing about this, from our standpoint as just citizens of this country, is that Mueller, like we said earlier, was a great pick. He was very bipartisan. I believe he was retired. He had no political affiliation.
Pretty sure
he came out of retirement to come back in and do this special counsel investigation.
And he was voted 100-0. Like
I think that's
everybody,
right.
yeah. It was either 96-0 or 100-0.
And I think, like I
so
said,
everybody wanted him.
everybody knew that he would at least be better than Comey.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
And it was actually in Rod Rosenstein's Rosenstein. Sorry for my pronunciation, but his actual paperwork that appointed Mueller to this case actually stated that he had open field. It stated that he was looking into the Trump administration and all parties interested. So it kind of gave him a very open landscape and free reign to do this investigation wherever he needed to. So it wasn't really specifically pigeonholed into the political bias that James Comey had.
Right.
And this is where it kind of stemmed and split because, like we said previously, that Steele dossier had mostly information about Manafort and
just random stuff.
Random people and the random junk. So, I can't remember his name ever. Mueller. Mueller started to find that information out about Flynn and all of this other stuff at that point.
So Mueller's appointed 5/17/2017. We got a bit of a gap here, and that's probably because Mueller's just getting his feet wet here. It took him some time to really go through the evidence that they may have had already and start to really line up what his schedule, what his plan was going to be in gathering the information based on the evidence they had. But what happens on August 2nd of 2017 is Trump signs new sanctions against Russia. Okay, so Russia responds to this and says that these new sanctions are a full-scale trade war.
Those were the ones where Trump was disagreeing with.
Correct. Trump didn't want to sign these sanctions.
Oh, okay, so these were
the ones that Trump did not want
I have
to
my
take part
timeline
in.
mixed up.
Right.
These are ones he was pretty much they forced his hand, and he really didn't want to do it.
I actually think previously to this, I think this is what was dealing with Obama sanctions. So I think there was a time limit on the span that Obama sanctions happened, and there's actually a law in place that if a certain event happened, that you had to put sanctions on the other countries. So it was pretty much that Trump had to follow suit with the laws that were in place because of something that Russia did, that we had to impose new sanctions on them. So he signed these sanctions, and then that's what...
Yeah, this is when Congress pretty much forced his hand. He said he could do a better job.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's try to correct the record on the previous sanctions. Those were...
The ones that he was easing, I don't believe those were the ones that were altered by the Obama administration. I think the Obama administration stuff was the laws that were put in place that made him have to do sanctions in this particular case.
Okay.
Yeah, because obviously if he's lifting them, that's going to be good for Russia.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so on October 5th, 2017, we recall this character, George Papadopoulos. He was the sort of underling staffer.
Yeah, he was
for
the one who was, 24 days? And
campaign. It was 14
Yeah,
days. This is the day that
yeah.
he pleads guilty to lying to the FBI about his efforts to put the Trump campaign in contact with Moscow.
And that's again when we were talking about that one girl's husband or something, or somebody, it was a waitress, but we talked about that.
Yeah, with Putin's relative.
Yeah.
Oh,
That was
right.
Yeah.
Right.
He was trying to get directly in with Putin.
Yeah. And I'd be curious to see if there's any connection. I don't really know this, but I'd be curious to see if there's any connection between Papadopoulos and Manafort in terms of
Yeah, that's something we didn't really look into.
Because they seem to have the same kind of persona,
Like
if you will, which is like, I can get us in
almost
with the
like
Russians,
motive,
you know?
Yeah, I kind of think Papadopoulos, though, was more of like a wrong place, wrong time kind of guy.
Maybe.
'Cause
And he was probably desperate to just stand out on the campaign and do what,
correct.
you know,
I think he was a fresh face in the campaign.
Yeah.
He knew
He's
Trump
just a
was
fall
trying
guy.
to, and this was right around the time of the Trump Tower talks. I mean, this was in between the time span of January and June where they were having the Trump Tower discussions.
Oh,
So
you're saying when Papadopoulos,
did that, not when he was
Because
charged.
right now we're up in October of 17.
Yes.
This is when he finally pleads guilty.
Yeah.
Because Mueller's really starting to
Yeah.
get to this stuff, right? And that's what we're going to see here. These next few events are basically charges, right?
Yeah.
So October 30th, Mueller files charges against Manafort and Rick Gates. 12 charges in total: conspiracy to launder money, violation of the 1938 Foreign Agents Registration Act, and then false and misleading Ferris statements and conspiracy against the United States. We touched on Manafort in part one and a little bit here, so I don't think we're going to get into him too much. Let's see, that was October 30th. On November 1st, so 2 days later, Michael Flynn, he was the one DJ covered in terms of the
sanctions,
The
the talks of the
ambassador talks,
sanctions.
with the ambassador from Russia.
To back off, we got handled.
He pleads guilty to lying to the FBI about his discussions with the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak, during the presidential transition. That's that transition of power between the election and January 19th. I think that's right, 19th. At any rate, mid-January-ish. And then, Flynn and Kislyak had discussed U.S. sanctions against Russia for election meddling.
Yeah. And this is, I think that's talking about, we're getting to the point where we're talking about the Russian individuals that were actually indicted for the hacks in the company. What's is actually that company that I stated before, the Internet Research LLC,
yeah.
Internet Research Company LLC. They also receive an indictment for
Wasn't there like 13 total?
13 total.
The Russian.
13 Russian individuals across 3 companies.
Yeah. And the thing is, though, is these companies, it's not like these were specifically made for the meddling in the 2016 election. We kind of have to look at the dates that this company started. I believe it was like 2013, 2014. They had already started hacking the United States.
Oh yeah, that was like that was one of the first points we touched on in part 1.
Yep.
In the timeline was just
these hacks have been going on for a while.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got, let's see, 12.
We touched on Flynn.
Yeah, we talked about Flynn.
Yeah, and then we just mentioned the 13 Russian, between the 3 Russian companies.
Yeah, so Flynn pleaded on December 1st.
Yep.
He pleaded guilty to giving false testimony to the FBI about his contacts with Sergei Kislyak.
He's the Russian ambassador.
Yep. February 16th of 18, Mueller indicts the 13 Russians for Russian propaganda that targeted Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton and later President-elect Donald Trump.
So they're involved in both of the hacks.
Right.
Yeah.
February 23rd, Rick Gates pleads guilty to lying to investigators and financial fraud, hiding money he earned lobbying for politicians in the Ukraine along with Manafort. And Mueller delays his sentencing due to cooperation. But this ultimately shows no direct ties to Trump.
We missed on February 20th. Mueller charged Alex van der Zwaan with making false statements in the Russian probe dealing with conversations with Gates and Manafort.
Yeah.
So there was somebody else who...
And I believe he was a lawyer, wasn't he?
I
Van der Zwaan?
believe so.
He's a Russian lawyer.
Yeah, but he essentially got charged because...
I think he was pretty much the Russian connect on the side during the Manafort Gates case. But those 3 were kind of together. That was kind of the separate case that really didn't have to do with the Trump administration.
Yeah, I don't think he's on here.
But yeah, essentially
not a
made
big
false
figure.
statements with Gates and Manafort, so that probably helped in them as well.
Yeah. And so this is, let's see, now we're into April 9th, 2018. FBI raids Cohen's office at the law firm of Squire Patton Boggs, as well as his home, his hotel room in New York City, based on a search warrant that they got.
Yes,
so
sir.
there's plenty of new evidence. I think you alluded to some of that evidence
Oh, yeah.
earlier, right?
We had talked. I mean, the thing is with all these charges now, and this is kind of what skewed everybody's opinions on this whole investigation. These tidbits of information are coming in now. This is the time frame where they're coming in out of order, very small tidbits at a time. People are seeing one charge. They kind of don't really have a grasp of the whole picture. And that's whenever we kind of get, like, I believe we even talked about, like, how they release this information, like, after they investigate it, possibly, like, all the avenues that they think they could have investigated, that's when they're going to release this information.
Right, they have to have exhausted
Correct.
all of their
Yeah.
avenues before they say anything, because if not, they're jeopardizing.
And even, like, when we get to, like, the last piece of investigation, or, like, the last investigation charge that was released was dealing with the $500,000 that we talked about came from Victor Vexelberg.
Vexelberg.
Mel's the Cohen.
Yeah, that money was paid to Cohen, and that was the last information we really got released, and that got redacted from, or unredacted from the Mueller report before he actually released the Mueller report to the Attorney General.
Yep. Okay, so moving forward. Okay. June 1st, 2018. Barr, I think I have him up here. Let me zoom in on him a little bit. He is the Attorney General, so he's above Mueller. He's essentially Mueller's boss. Top, what they call these guys, the top lawyer in the U.S., right?
Oh, yeah.
Looks like a jolly man.
Yeah. He looks like someone who should be on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but yeah. So William Barr sends, and this is sort of a callback to maybe the Peter Strzok kind of stuff and the bias, but we can get into it. So Barr sends an unsolicited 20-page memo to Rod Rosenstein, who's the Deputy Attorney General. We talked about him earlier. And he was arguing that the special counsel's approach to the potential obstruction of justice by Trump was fatally misconceived, and that, based on his knowledge, Trump's actions were within his presidential authority. So, this was taken with a grain of salt, because obviously the investigation continued. I mean, I think the only tie we could really make with this is that ultimately, in the end, they left the obstruction of justice part of the investigation up to Congress.
Yeah.
So they didn't make any recommendations, and I think that, in a way, Mueller didn't really even dive into it too much, because this was something that he was going to leave up to Congress to follow up on.
Wasn't Barr essentially the one who released the statement when Mueller released the report as well?
Yeah, so he was the one that wrote the summary, or I guess
The
at least
4-page
delivered the
summarization.
summary to Congress. Yeah.
I think we might have hit on this too, but whenever we're talking about these special investigations, a lot of presidents never get indicted.
Right.
Yeah, we did talk about that in part one.
Yes, it's just usually a lot of people, like Watergate, president never got indicted. It's always the underlings and like the people that are working for this case. They use the people that are working for them as scapegoats, which is kind of...
So you're saying they may be guilty, but there's somebody else to take the fall.
Correct, yeah. It's just an easy misdirection.
And these are like those barriers that we talked about, which is like, essentially maybe...
Legal
like,
safeguards.
Yeah. Trump just sets up these kind of
And
walls, which allows him to deny everything.
If I give you this money and you pay him, then that's on you.
And let's be real. It's one of two things happen. Either Trump's innocent or he's a mastermind and he had a lot of it set up.
Well, I mean, I feel like it could fall anywhere in the middle there, you know?
Well,
and that's almost a subjective terminology
Yeah.
of like, is he a mastermind? Because like most people would say he's stupid. Like he couldn't really put all this stuff together and keep it all straight and not tweet
But
it
he's
all
also-
out, like you said. You know,
he's also a businessman, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's not only is he a businessman, he's a very scam artist like businessman. Like if you go into his past, all of his businesses that went through bankruptcy, all of his information dealing with like not paying taxes and stuff. I mean, they didn't even come out. I might be wrong, but they didn't even come out at one point, or somebody said like, "Oh well, I didn't pay taxes because I'm not stupid" or something along those lines. I don't know.
But yeah, nobody is ever arguing that Trump is this ethical businessman.
No,
exactly.
And I think we've covered that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's keep moving here. June 8th, Manafort was indicted for obstruction of justice and witness tampering, along with longtime associate Konstantin Kilimnik. Let me just pull these guys up real quick. Konstantin Kilimnik was the guy that always worked for Manafort. Like, it was like 2005 when he started working there. That's this guy here. He was, like I said earlier in part one, he was kind of like their fixer in Kiev.
Then they have ties like years, like decades.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about Kilimnik, how long that relationship went on. I think he was essentially a contractor or employed by Manafort and Gates for something like 10 years here before all of this stuff happened.
That's a long time.
Okay.
The charges involved allegations that Manafort had attempted to convince others to lie about undisclosed lobbying efforts on behalf of Ukraine's former pro-Russian government.
Yep.
July 1st of 2018, indictment by the Justice Department of 12 Russian GRU intelligence officials posing as Guccifer 2.0 persona. I always saw that. Is it Guccifer or Guccifer? It's like kind of like Gucci, right?
Gucci.
Yeah, I'm going to call it Guccifer. It's kind of weird.
That is weird.
Yeah, so...
Mix between Gucci and Lucifer is what it sounds
So these GRU intelligence officials were posing as this persona, and they were indicted for conspiring to interfere in the 2016 elections, hacking into computers of the Clinton campaign, the Democratic National Committee, even state election boards and secretaries of several states. So, you can look into what these guys attempted to do, and they were definitely trying to get into the election stuff, like in a couple different ways here.
Yeah. They even were hacking registration, or was it the voter registration?
Voter roll. So they didn't succeed, but they said that there was, I don't know what state it was, there was an attempt by these IPs, if you will, this persona, to get into the voter registration of that state. I mean, that's like, if that had succeeded, I think we would probably look at all this a lot differently.
The thing with hacking though too is like the ones that don't succeed, or the ones that like don't succeed in the failed hacks, you catch. The ones that do succeed,
you never know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
Like you never know about it.
So when the hacker is able to.
Yeah, they cover the tracks, they get rid of it. So, we know about all of these failed hacks, but how many hacks could have been successful?
We also know
we don't want to speculate that, but it's a good point to make.
Just in that field alone, successful hacks, they're not found.
And we already talked about how much Russia, didn't want Hillary in, so it could have been multiple companies.
Right.
And we also have to acknowledge that the Facebook, that hack, that was the Russian.
Oh, is that the Russian bots?
That was the targeted ads.
Okay, yeah.
Where they took millions.
And there was a mention earlier on the timeline about that sort of, what was it, information that was disseminated to hurt Hillary and essentially help Donald Trump.
It was pretty much targeted ads to sway.
Right.
To sway votes.
And this is maybe where some of that fake news kind of stuff started to really boil up because, essentially they were putting out fake news on these people just to kind of influence.
Exactly.
Opinions and perceptions. So almost, as if we weren't going to talk about this guy ever again, Peter Strzok comes back up here, right?
How did he make it this far?
Is
my question.
August 10th of 2018,
You're fired.
FBI Deputy Director David Bowditch finally fires Peter Strzok. Now, this was, let's say it was something like 2 weeks after the text messages between Page and Strzok were found. So this was,
I think they saw the writing on the wall, we gotta get rid of this guy.
Yeah, I mean, we already stopped this investigation with Comey and brought Mueller in so that this could be a non-biased, fair investigation. And then we find out all this stuff about Strzok, and Strzok was the lead investigator up until this point.
No, that doesn't look good for your side either.
And he started it. Let's be honest.
When he started
the FISA warrants and the Steele dossier.
Yeah.
That was him.
He wasn't the lead investigator then. Because that was actually the Comey investigation. Yeah. There was a whole team. I'm not even really sure what the structure of their team was when that was being investigated. He's kind of like the
gears that got it moving.
But when Mueller came in, he was still one of those sort of central investigators. and then it was, I'm not sure exactly when, but over the course of that investigation, at some point, he was made the lead investigator.
Yeah.
And so at this point, August 10th, 2018, is when he gets fired because we find out about these text messages, all of the bias, and that really starts to, at least shape that fair picture, which we wanted to present here, which is, there's this shady stuff with Trump, but there's also this really biased political aspect of what the FBI is trying to do.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And obviously he was in support of Hillary. He didn't want her private emails, and he hid the hard drive too.
Yeah, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, like when they were doing investigations with Hillary and her private email servers, he was supposed to give up the hard drive. I'm not sure
So the hard drive you're referring to is Anthony Weiner's laptop, which was supposed to be potentially compromised. It was part of that investigation. Strzok was supposed to submit that to the FBI's forensic specialist to do their kind of analysis, and the election was November 8th. He waited until November 9th to submit that. It was like 2 weeks before the election that Hillary's investigation was opened back up.
Yeah.
So you would think
we should probably give all the evidence.
Let's give Strzok maybe a little credit and be fair here. Like he was having this Hillary investigation, but he was also involved in the Trump investigation. He had a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
He could have had good reasons why he didn't submit the hard drive till after the election. But again, just on the surface here, it seems like he could have submitted it earlier and he didn't. He waited until November 9th, the day after the election, to submit it for it to be analyzed. Did you see he was asked about it
on the 8th, though?
Sorry?
He was asked about the hard drive on the 8th?
No, he was supposed to submit it.
By the 8th?
No,
he was just supposed to submit it.
The investigation was opened back up,
but
he had this hard drive that
he held it till after.
I do remember. I haven't looked in that side of the argument too much.
It's not punitive. It doesn't really. It's not a smoking gun, but it just kind of adds to the optics.
It's a good thing to address.
You have to also look is that really make it that Hillary would be a corrupt one if we ever get into depth about the Hillary email scandal? But if he already had these political biases against Trump, he's already talking to Lisa Page about we won't let Trump get in the office, all of these different things. He almost wouldn't want to give this hard drive up, not because Hillary asked him not to give this hard drive up, but just because he seems to have this hate for Trump.
Yeah.
That he's not really biased for Hillary, but he's biased against Trump.
Let's hear what do you disagree with that?
Yeah, because also when they found Hillary essentially not guilty, they changed the wording in her sentence, or when they submitted the report or released it, that she was exonerated.
Yeah, so I think
charged.
The original verbiage was something like grossly negligent, which they turned into something that was a massive euphemism. And
pretty much because how Mueller said that Trump's not exonerated.
Right.
I'm pretty sure Mueller probably could have said that, and it would have freed and cleared Trump. They did the exact opposite to Hillary.
Well, I do think there's a big difference in this FBI investigation where we had a lot of political bias, and we have Mueller's investigation.
But Strzok was involved in both.
Strzok wasn't really involved in the Mueller investigation.
Right?
Strzok
was the lead investigator on the Mueller investigation. He was fired in August. We just covered it, August 10th, 2018. Now, nobody knew about his bias. They didn't have the evidence, at least. As soon as they did, then he got fired.
But he also cut a deal with the Hillary that he wasn't going to investigate her private server. That was part of that as well. To me isn't just saying he's against Trump. He's for Hillary. That's
his text messages make that very clear.
Yeah.
Hillary should win.
It was 100 million to 0.
Yeah.
Especially when you're going to be investigating her.
And this is the whole conflict of interest thing, which is the reason why Mueller came in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This was one of those moments where I think, knowing what we know now, had we known it back then, people could have started calling for, essentially what would be a mistrial, or we need this investigation's biased too. How can we get a real nonpartisan investigation?
Mueller had not been involved. Trump may have been found guilty of some stuff that he was not. It's a speculation.
Yeah. Sure.
It's a bold claim, but to me, Mueller is the godsend in this whole thing. And
kind of I think we talked about this before. The reason that I don't think that Mueller's case was started on false grounds, and the FBI investigation, since that was really involving more of the Manafort and Gates, even if that investigation was thrown out, let's say because it was formed and done based upon these strong political biases, when Mueller was in charge of the investigation and this different evidence came out about a completely different set of individuals in a completely different situation of charges, it almost makes it like they're we have to kind of look at them as two completely different separate investigations.
I think we did talk on that in
we
part one. But it's still relevant that this asshole was played a part.
Oh, no.
A big part. In
the thing is, I mean, I just want to touch on you calling him an asshole. If you watch the testimonies of him in Congress,
he's overconfident. He's a smug. Like he
just
a
has
prick.
a smile on his face.
It's like he knows he can't be touched. Type of.
And that's probably how Trump would look if he was actually interviewed. But it's not fun to watch him when you know what you know about him. He's
a piece of shit.
Yeah. Okay.
I just think he's slimy. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, he basically jeopardized, like with his bias, he jeopardized the entire thing. And again, like going back to like the American citizen, what do they care about? They care about the truth.
Yeah.
And you may agree with his bias, but if you want actual indictments to come out of this stuff, you can't be pushing this guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You do it the right way because you know that in the court of law, this kind of stuff can get that stuff thrown out.
Well, the law's supposed to be blind. It's supposed to be evidential proof.
We do kind of have to make sure we look at, did his bias affect his work and like the evidence that he did get. I mean, it's tough to see.
It's so hard to do that.
It's so hard to determine.
It's such a hearsay statement.
It is a hearsay statement. He's publicly disclosing this political bias, which you can't really do. But how many people that are in these positions technically probably have these political biases for one?
I'm just a firm believer. If you're in the FBI, CIA, this type of department, you shouldn't have a bias. You should be seeking.
It's hard to not have a bias.
Exactly. I guarantee you, DJ's right that people do. But I don't think that's right.
Everybody kind of has their opinion on something.
Yeah.
And that's like where it comes down to when you're breaking down like.
Yeah, but you're also paid to do a job.
So I think that like if politics is being used in a different arena, then maybe it's not a big deal. So like let's say we're talking about politics being involved in like something the CIA is doing in Mexico. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's not as bad as saying like there's something going on in politics that the FBI is going to investigate, and then they're allowed to like have their biases in politics and still investigate that. It'd be like it's a conflict of interest. It's like if someone was pro Mexico and they were investigating Mexico,
obviously
you'd be
the
like,
result's probably going to reflect how they feel.
I kind of talked about this.
I mean?
I kind of talked about this with you actually, and I almost think it forms this sense of like a checks and balances type of thing. If we kind of look at the political bias based investigations, so like if you have a political bias investigation starting on the right, they're really checking the left through a very big lens. I mean, they're trying to scrutinize the left on any mistake they make. So if you do have these political bias investigations, you're kind of catching more situations where there might be this collusion, where there might be this corruption within these organizations.
You just got to be careful if you essentially leave out information that could potentially...
Correct, and that's what we kind of need to...
evidential proof, yeah.
That's kind of something we would need to hit on and like dig deeper into further, like how much did Peter Strzok's bias affect his...
I think it all depends on what you're talking about.
Well, and so I think that's probably a good point in the conversation to bring this up. It's something I was going to touch on at the end. But what's happening now is Lindsey Graham, who's a congressman, I believe he's in the House. I don't know, House or Senate, obviously. Lindsey Graham is coming out publicly now saying that he and apparently other members of the GOP are going to be pushing for an investigation into the FISA applications, into Peter Strzok's bias, and all of that, and so that's forthcoming. I think, like at least he's talking about doing it, and we've talked about this. Like even though we might disagree on the bias and whether or not we know this or that, we both agree. I think we all agree that there's something that doesn't seem totally right there, and it should be fair game. Like they should be allowed to investigate that and find out what really happened at the beginning.
Obviously, they have some sort of inclination that something went on. Why else would they open an investigation?
Well, they know, like Congress knows more than us, the public, and I think just on what we've laid out here, it at least puts a big question mark there.
Well, I'm a little unsure of what Lindsey Graham and them starting up this investigation actually would know of the redacted information that was in his FISA warrants, or in his FISA application.
But they interviewed him. They interviewed Strzok in Congress. Remember, was it Trey Gowdy did all of the questioning? Yeah. They asked him a lot of questions, and I'm not sure, but a lot of times they have those public hearings, which is just kind of like for us, but they also have a private hearing where they ask questions that are off the record for us.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case with Strzok. I would imagine that he's got plenty to tell them. And when you see how he answered those questions publicly on camera, he always said, like, as you know, I can't answer these questions because it's an ongoing investigation.
Yeah.
But I think, like, in a private interview, things might be different in terms of what he could be compelled to tell them, you know?
Right. But it's also, I mean, like, if you look at how Congress releases information to the public when they receive it, too, like, you have to be very particular about what you even tell to Congress.
Yeah. And this looks bad for the FBI, so they're not going to want.
No, they're not
going to find every way they can
information.
to not have to admit to this stuff because it looks bad. So let's move on because we're actually getting close to the end of the timeline here, and then we can try to wrap it up with sort of
thoughts.
Yeah, outlooks, perceptions, just kind of even telling our story about going through this research process. But where we are now, right? Peter Strzok gets fired August 10th, 18. August 21st, Cohen officially surrenders to the FBI. That afternoon, Cohen pleads guilty to 8 criminal charges, 5 counts of tax evasion, 1 count of making false statements to a financial institution, 1 of willfully causing an unlawful corporate contribution, 1 of making an excessive campaign contribution at the request of a candidate, Trump, for the principal purpose of influencing the election.
I think this is one of the biggest moments for the collusion in.
This was pretty big.
This was pretty big.
Was huge,
but also this kind of had to be taken with a grain of salt from the left side.
Cohen lies a lot.
Cohen lied. He previously lied to Congress. Now this gives the right the ability to say, well, he lied to them before.
You can't trust anything he says.
Well, how does he know he's not lying now? And he also kind of did a complete flip too. Like he was almost completely against Trump, and now I think even at this point, he's not any alignment with Trump whatsoever, completely against him.
Oh, he was totally his buddy.
He had to flip on him.
Yeah, he had to flip. He did a complete flip.
Yeah, and there was something I wanted to dig into. I'd heard something about this Congressman Adam Schiff, who before Cohen's testimony, there was apparently that Congress actually asked these questions in one of their interviewing sessions, but Adam Schiff apparently met with he's a Democrat. Longtime lawyer but also in Congress. He met with Cohen prior to his final testimony. That was kind of like the big news story of him saying I may have lied, but I'm not a liar, like that testimony. That Adam Schiff met with him in New York for 10 hours the day before that. And so what we really see is that maybe they were coaching him, maybe they weren't, but at any rate, Cohen was clearly aligning with the other side of the investigation.
When he had been with Trump out for years.
Yeah. So that's Cohen. That was a big moment. Next we have George Papadopoulos on September 1st. He was sentenced to his 14 days in jail. We've covered plenty about him. November 1st, Cohen additionally pleads guilty to lying to Congress about Russian-based development proposal, Trump Tower, Moscow.
Wasn't that he lied about the time it happened or something like that?
I'm not sure. Do you know that, DJ?
I think that's what it was.
I think this is where we actually find out the truth from Cohen about the January through June meetings.
Okay.
So
the time frames.
The time frames. So we had known that he had talked about these Trump Towers in 2007, 2005, and stuff along these natures. But I don't think it was known prior to when he stated this that these meetings happened all the way up until June, right in the election time. Which, I mean, you're in the year of your election. You shouldn't be going to try to pursue business deals that are going to affect another country to these levels. Because that's going to have an influence on who they want. The whole country wants it.
So has Flynn been sentenced yet? Because the next date I have on here is December 1st of 2018. And this is only 4 months ago.
Flynn was
that it was delayed. The
sentencing was delayed.
Correct. I believe that Flynn has been helping a lot with
the
Mueller
investigation.
Was this a plea deal? originally?
I don't think he has a plea deal yet. I think him, Manafort, and Gates all have delayed sentencing. I think Manafort.
No, Manafort was charged. Yeah.
He's in jail. Gates, I believe, is too.
Yeah.
But Flynn, I'm pretty sure his is still pending delayed and hasn't actually been charged as of yet.
Yeah.
That could have been because they were still following up on evidence on that as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you'll notice here, Flynn a lot was dealing with the sanctions and talking to Russia about the sanctions, and the last bit of information was that $500,000.
Right.
So they were probably investigating that realm up until the very end of the investigation whenever they released the report.
Are we almost to the end of the timeline then?
Yeah, we only have a few more points here. So, January 1st of this year, 2019, Roger Stone is arrested and charged with 7 felonies, lying to Congress under oath, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. We talked about his involvement earlier. I'm not totally sure, really where he about what he lied, but we know his involvement was around how did he find out that this information was going to get leaked?
Yeah.
And I think he lied about him getting contact with Julian Assange, and whatever those avenues of communication were where he was getting that information. He lied to Congress. He obstructed justice. He tampered with some evidence.
I actually wish I would have pursued investigating more about him myself. I kind of missed the boat with Roger Stone.
A little bit.
I do think his witness tampering was a big thing because I think it was Russian people that he was that were going to be investigated that Stone was tampering with. So I'm not sure.
I don't know if that we would have to dive into.
I can't really state any definites with the Roger Stone case, so I'm kind of stray away from that one.
Yeah.
For now.
We have March 1st of this year. Manafort pleads guilty 8 counts of tax and bank fraud. He's sentenced to 4 years in prison. A separate federal judge sentences Manafort to an additional 3.5 years related to secret foreign lobbying and witness tampering. But this is ultimately unrelated to the Trump and the Trump campaign.
Yeah. What he cannot get pardoned for, which I'm sure we're going to talk about.
But Manafort can't.
Manafort can't get pardoned.
And why not?
Because of the state level charges.
Oh, so these were state level charges?
He got 3 years from the federal, 3.5 years from federal, and he also received 3 more years from the state level. So he can be pardoned for the 3.5 years federally, but he can't be pardoned for the state years.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. Is that because what I have here is that it was 2 different federal judges.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we might have to follow up on that.
You might be right. You might be maybe
because we know that the New York investigations are going on. There's the state of New York and the Southern District of New York, but they haven't really even charged. They haven't charged people yet.
Yeah.
They're still investigating, I think.
Well, you figure it just dropped.
Yeah. Okay, so we have March 22nd. Mueller concludes his investigation, submits the special counsel's final report to the Attorney General William Barr.
Yeah.
Let's just scroll up a little bit here.
That's where we are, present day.
Yeah, pretty much today, right? And then we talked about the summary report that was delivered to Congress on 3/24. So that brings us up to 3 or 4 days ago, right? And
that's been a lot. We found that out, and then that's when we were we're doing this.
Yeah, we want to know what's going on here, and we want our viewers to know what's going on. Whatever we learn,
and that's kind of the goal. Is there was when we started looking into this, there was so much that went on. That it was how do we get all this out? So essentially, the timeline would be a nice thing to follow,
right?
Just from start.
It keeps us honest, because otherwise, to somebody that's not familiar with these people and these facts about the investigations that went on.
Look how many people.
It all gets crossed up and you get confused. It's just kind of anchors us to sort of chronological time, so that walks us through it in a better way.
One of the big things I kind of wanted to state now that we're kind of at the end of the timeline and giving a summary.
Yeah.
Me and you both started with political bias on this. Definitely. We did. And you too as well. We definitely all had differing opinions, and we were all arguing.
I've been saying, Trump's innocent.
Yeah.
Evidential proof. They found none. He's off.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just we had several arguments and heated debates dealing with this.
Yeah.
And even I remember one occurrence. Me and you argued for 6 hours specifically about Peter Strzok.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And it was pretty heated. And this is definitely a different episode, so hopefully on different things you might get to see a little bit of that conversation in the future.
We will.
But for this one in particular, it was definitely interesting to see us come to so much agreement after doing more investigating, showing each other the information from all the standpoints, and kind of realizing that it's corruption on both sides. It's not really. We have to make sure to realize that there's good and bad in every political stance and viewpoint.
I think if I were to summarize my findings on it is I still Trump's he's innocent. But I would not be surprised if something came out.
I think and when I hear the word innocent, I think I pointed this out to you guys, right? The court of law doesn't have an understanding of innocent. It has guilty and not guilty. Yeah. Either there's enough evidence to say you're guilty, or there is we don't know, and so you're not charged with any crime. And that's why Barr says at the end of his summary report, while this doesn't indict Trump, it doesn't exonerate him either.
But ultimately. Current state,
he's not guilty. He's not innocent. Right. He's not guilty.
But I mean, if this was, any media outlet can release, Trump innocent, because ultimately that's what media does. It's headline grabbing. But as of right now, he's not guilty, and I wouldn't be surprised if something came out and found him guilty.
I don't know. I think if they technically are talking about the innocent point, I feel like you have to have substantial evidence to go against the whole investigation.
Well, no, you're innocent until proven guilty.
No, everybody's innocent then.
Yeah. I mean, so let's talk about that, right? I mean, did the media treat him like he was innocent until proven guilty? Did people, and as individuals perceiving these facts coming out, the way they were delivered through biased media outlets, and people jumping to conclusions and presumptions that this is clear, it's clear evidence that he was colluding with Russia.
Think about it this way: if you listen to a certain media outlet and you hear the same thing every day, all day, you're going to believe it. Yeah. Which is why you said you
give them credit, right?
Yeah, majority of people still feel that he shouldn't be exonerated and he should be investigated.
I mean, for me, I definitely don't think that the investigations should continue really any further, especially on the federal level. I mean, I would like to see what New York State comes with their investigations that are coming up. I definitely think that we do not have an evidence to call him guilty. He's definitely not guilty. He was clearly.
We all put plenty of faith in Mueller that he was going to do the right thing. We've talked about how we all agree that he was a bipartisan or nonpartisan actor in all of this. And if that's what he recommends, I think we have to say, because he does know what's underneath of that redaction. Yeah. Right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If that's what he comes up with, that's at least what's best for the country.
Oh, yeah.
We know that New York State, Southern District of New York, are continuing lawsuits against Trump. Lindsey Graham's going to probably be looking into the FISA applications. So there's probably going to be more information that we can learn about this in the future. But people are talking right now about, when are we going to get the full report? When is Mueller going to let that loose? Even when we get that, a lot of it's going to be redacted.
You're never going to get the whole thing.
Well, tell us what you found out, right? With the Watergate report, or even the 9/11 Commission. We waited for years for that stuff, right?
Yeah, and it's just. It doesn't happen. I mean, you could pretty much have to wait until the security clearance expires on these documents before.
Yeah, Freedom of Information Act.
Freedom of Information Act stuff to release this information based upon
which when it's available, people will do that.
Oh yeah, I mean, it'll definitely come out, especially with this. This is one of the most controversial elections in a century.
Well, I think the whole world was paying attention.
Oh yeah,
there was a lot of people in other countries who were like, that's all we've been following is the U.S. election.
Yeah.
No, but there was one thing I wanted to even address about with the Mueller report. You could say, there's potential that he's guilty, which is why he didn't say he's exonerated. Yeah, Trump.
Okay.
But you can also state that Mueller may have been covering his ass by allowing it to be open.
For Congress.
For the left to pick up.
Oh, so you're saying, okay, so let's be clear about that. There were essentially two parts to Mueller's investigation. One of them was, Russian collusion, but it was really, I actually read something where Mueller was given the clearance to investigate Trump's ties to China, to any foreign actors, right? So it was centralized around Russia, but it could have been wider than that too. It's just everyone's paying attention to what happened with Russia, and that really is the core of the story too. But where we are right now with what we know, what we don't know, what information we think we might get, right? We're at a good point now, and that's why we wanted to do this episode, because I think we're sort of in a we're going to be in a holding pattern with this for a little while as a country before we find anything else new out. But the good thing is, like, if you're on the side of, we need justice, like Trump needs to like serve time, or he needs to be indicted, or we need to find out, there's got to be some sort of collusion that we can nail him down to. That stuff, those investigations are still happening, and that might happen. If you're on the other side and you're saying this whole investigation was biased and it should be thrown out because they were pushing their political agenda from the start,
even
that investigation is going on, or should be going on.
Well, even on the right side, you can just argue, hey, they didn't find anything.
For now.
Yeah. But current state, he's not guilty.
I still feel like, though, even if we look at the history of how Trump acted while this investigation was going on and the things that he was doing.
Yeah.
He was having conversations with Russia while the Steele dossier stuff was going on. The Trump Towers, he was pretty much saying Russia was good guys, like, to our whole country, when we already knew that Russian meddling happened in our elections.
Well, he wasn't really saying they were good guys. His campaign speeches were all like, we need to be harder on Russia. They're stealing our money.
Well, his campaign speeches were. But after he took office, he was like, he's friends with Russia. He's all buddy-buddy with Putin.
Well, because he has to play foreign affairs now, though.
Yeah, right? I guess that's kind of...
And that's true now.
Look at him with Korea, too.
Yeah. Yeah, he has to hang out with Kim Jong-un.
I think he's one of the first ones to shake his hand.
I think he's actually friends with Kim Jong-un.
No, but didn't they say that was like one of the most crazy historic moments? Is our U.S. president shook his hand.
Yeah, like actually sitting down with him and talking.
It's a good or bad thing, but that's insane.
Yeah.
Who would have ever thought that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff. As soon as he's in office and he's in charge of those sort of foreign relationships, then, saying that, like, he's nice to Russia, well, there's a lot of reasons why he might need to do that.
I also know there's information he might not have known about the things that were indicted with and charged, and I'm sure there are things that he didn't know that were truthful at the time, maybe, but whenever Cohen and some of these news outlets were posting some of this information over the course of the investigation, and he would come out and say, this is fake news, this is fake news, and now we're coming to the conclusion and this information is released and some of it turns out to not be fake, we kind of have to look at that bias on both sides, where the left is, we're saying he's guilty all the time, but the right is also there saying, we're not guilty, this witch evidence needs thrown out, this is a witch hunt.
Well, here's the thing.
Even though that there's a lot of indictments, he's hindering it.
I think we all can agree that a lot of shady shit went on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And there is potential.
Oh yeah.
I think going into this, we weren't there.
Yeah, the interesting thing too, which we didn't touch on too much, is that this sort of all kind of starts with Hillary's emails.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which we didn't touch on too much, but it
we
really is sort of connected by extension to the beginning of all of this, because Peter Strzok was working there, that the Russians were apparently hacking the DNC, and they want to claim that that's how they got leaked. There are other people that claim that it was an insider that leaked it to someone via thumb drive.
Data transfer.
There's all of that stuff too.
But on that. I think that'd be a good.
It's essentially like opposing smear campaigns, and that's honestly kind of like where I think that link is like we said, all these politicians, even in our local governments, are doing these smear campaigns. So
it's all good.
We had the smear campaign from Hillary against Russia. We had the smear campaign against Hillary with the emails, and then a smear campaign against Trump with the Russia.
I think maybe it's time to wrap it up.
Yeah. So we got through the timeline. We kind of.
I think it was very robust.
This was a lot.
Subject.
This was a lot, and I just want to say, you touched on it earlier. I think it's important to note, we came into this thinking we need to learn, but at the same time we held those sort of assumptions or biases that really, clearly he's innocent, right? Like those sorts of things, or clearly he's guilty. And that doing this research and really trying to lay this out,
it was very eye-opening.
Through the lens of doing this podcast was a growth experience for me in terms of sort of managing my biases.
I completely agree.
Finding ways to agree on disagreements.
Yeah.
Especially in a case like this where things are wishy-washy in some cases, we disagree on what it means, but there are things that we can find a way to agree on that are central to that point. Yeah. So it was really good for us as a group. It was good for us as individuals too.
And I hope that people see that this, a lot went into this investigation. It wasn't just oh, Trump did this, Trump. It was there was a lot of players, a lot of people involved, a lot of shit happened, and that's why we kind of had to really touch on a lot of the aspects that went on.
Yeah.
To build this big picture that we are in now.
Yeah. And definitely a worthy investigation to be pursued. And
and I think
I think there's more to come as well.
Yeah, like we touched on, there's other investigations and things that we'll probably be doing follow-ups on. Yeah. So yeah, that's our episode on Mueller. Like,
thanks
subscribe,
I hope
like
you
the
guys
video.
learned a lot.
Yeah, subscribe and watch our other videos that
Check
you
us
have
out on
not.
Facebook. Any feedback or questions, let us know in the comments. We'll try to respond to you as quick as possible.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks.